how we as women, how can we expect men to be accountable when we are not holding our peers accountable for the damage that has been done?
That's right.
Now here's the thing, and I'm going to ask you guys a tough question. Hopefully Demetria will get back in here for this one because I want her to get this in too. You guys are basically saying many, maybe not all, I don't know a number, you haven't given a number of what percentage, but there's enough Black women out there who have issues that the brothers are finding it hard to find women that they could create families with, sweet women who are cooperative, feminine, that they can work with. They're basically saying we can't find what we want here in America. What argument should I present to them to tell them, okay, I know that these women aren't ready, but you should wait for these Black women anyway to get themselves ready? Is that an argument that you would ask? Would you ask them to wait? Because that's what a lot of Black Americans say. Hey, you should, even though we have these we got these special set of circumstances, so you just need to wait before you get your family. So get you one of these ladies, clean her up, help her out, get her together mentally and also sometimes physically. Is that what you're telling these young men to do? Or what?
Just like young Black girls, they're raised up to, oh, well, man got to have this. He's got to be tall. He's got to be educated. He's got to have money. Young men need to start hearing that too. So I do not advocate young men to wait on women who are overweight. I do not advocate young men to wait on young ladies who have a bunch of babies. The young men that I mentor, they know that I have a choice word for these babies, what are used in the Bible. These are bastards, because they have no fathers, so I do not advocate men to wait for young ladies to get it together. I think they should get someone of their equal, that they're compatible with, that they can grow with and grow their foundation. A lot of these young ladies who are overweight have a whole lot of children, and all this going on. It's just a whole lot of drama that they just don't need. They need to be enjoying their lives with someone who are of equal compatibility with them, and that's on the same mind level, spirituality, physically fit.
All right, so Kimberly, you have a son, so I'm gonna ask you a question. Do you want one of these young women that we see in the Black community? Do you want one of them raising your grandchildren?
No. Dennis, you and I grew up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, hold on. Because that wasn't the answer that I thought you was gonna like work around it, and maybe there's some people and there's some good ones out there. You said no. Let me ask that question again, because I don't think I was. Do you want one of these young ladies in the Black community that we have now raising your grandchildren? That's the question I asked. I'm ready now. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, wow.
Dramatization.
After a car wreck, you may have to fight with a highly trained insurance company rep whose job is to knock your damaged claim down and out. It's a bad idea to enter the ring alone against a trained boxer, and it could be a bad idea to fight against a big insurance company by yourself. When the bell rings, attorney Dennis Sperling will be there to fight for your rights. If you've been seriously injured in a car wreck, call me, attorney Dennis Sperling, at 866-529-2444. That's 866-529-2444.
Or there's still going to be those eyes, even though, segregation is over. Down south, people still rarely mix. You see, you understand what it's like to be driving down the street, thinking maybe I don't have my driver's license. A cop pulls up behind you. You know how that feels. You know how it feels. If he looks in the window and he sees you're Black, you might get tailed for a few blocks. He might pull you over. That feeling of tension that you have, irrespective of the fact that you're a doctor, irrespective of the fact that I'm a lawyer, we all fit the stereotype. So my question to you is, Doc, how did it feel in Brazil? You can speak generally. You go down there, describe what you saw, describe how it felt to be around all those Black and brown people, and you just blended right in. Go ahead and go. That's the first thing I want you to deal with.
Hey, what's up, everybody? If you appreciate the format and you appreciate what we're doing here, then make sure you contribute to the Cash App, make sure you contribute to the PayPal, make sure you donate to the Super Chat. It's only you and your contributions that keep this thing going. Thanks.
And we got into the city, we got into Copacabana. I did not feel the type of surveillance. I did not feel the kind of hostile environment that we are accustomed to here in the United States, bro. I mean, I felt at home. I felt like I belonged there, like I was raised there, man. I mean, seriously, you know what I mean? And I know that, you know, there are no perfect, you know, environments and what have you, bro. But bro, I did not feel like I was a stranger, a foreigner, like I was unwelcome, like I was out of place, like I did not belong. And I felt that way the entire time I was there. I was there 8 days, and you know, I traveled with about 30 black men, and we were there that whole time, man. And I did not feel like a fish out of water, not at one moment, bro. I felt like I had been there before. You know what I mean? And yeah, it was a stress-free feeling.
Just to lay a foundation for everybody, out of around 191 million Brazilians, 91 million identify themselves as white, 82 million as mixed race, and 15 million as black. So technically, it's, you know, this is, you might have people who are white, they call themselves white, but in actuality they're mixed. People can say what they want to say, but the bottom line is you have almost 100 million people who are of African descent.
Oh man, it was a wonderful feeling. Rather, it was overwhelming. It you know, it again, man, it felt like home, bro. I mean, there was no anxiety or worry on my part. And I tell you, man, that stuff, it gets into your soul, man, because you feel it. And I mean, it's just rhythmic. I mean, and so, you know, you're up in there. I'm up in Black Rio, man, and I'm like, you know what? I mean, this is a black culture, black experience. They have their own thing, man.
But the average person might not understand what you mean. A typical American thinks America is the center of the world. We're the point of focus. You have our lovely ladies here will tell you they're the most beautiful women in the world. There are no other women more beautiful than them. They will tell you the rest of the world is copying our hip hop style and saggy pants. And they will tell you all these things, many of whom never even left the country, because only 2% of black people have passports. So they've never actually been anywhere else. So in their mind, we're the center of the universe. So please explain to them what you mean when you say nobody cares about what we're doing here in America. Basically, yeah. We're not the point of reference.
We are not the standard.
The United States, let me tell you what we have here. We have cold weather. We have mean, ugly, racist people. We have a hostile environment. And we're still getting over this whole Donald Trump phenomenon and everything that happened 20 years leading up to that. They might want to come visit. They might want to go shopping. They might want to visit California, go to Disneyland. But then they want to go back home.
My name is Dennis Sproul. If you've been involved in an accident, call me and I'll fight for you. I'm not an actor or a celebrity spokesperson. I'm a real trial lawyer, and I've appeared before real judges and real juries on behalf of people with serious injuries. So when I say I'll fight for you, I mean it, and I'll back it up. If you've been hurt in an automobile or 18-wheeler accident, contact me toll free at 866-529-2444, and I'll fight for your rights.
Hi, my name is Dennis Berlin. I'm not a lawyer, but my daddy is. Yeah. If you've been hurt in a car accident, call my daddy. No need to scream and yell like a little kid. Yeah, no, yeah. My daddy will fight for your rights. Yeah, fight for your rights. If you've been involved in a car accident, call my daddy, Attorney Dennis Berlin.
Hello, I'm Attorney Dennis Berlin. If you've been injured in a car wreck, call me at 713-229-0770.
Call my daddy.
And they came up with a scam, which was, look, all of these black people at the bottom who want to see something about themselves, let's appeal to their lowest common denominator. So instead of ideating on black men getting ahead, having good jobs, going to college, doing all of this, which was practical because it kept you from getting a 1A and an all expense paid vacation to sunny Nam. Well, they started glorifying pimps, hoes, drug dealers, gangsters, murderers, thieves, the whole 9 yards of dysfunction, and they've been on that ever since. I saw this, like, for example, when I was the public defender, my white subordinates had a real problem. Some of them were going into the black neighborhoods and interviewing black defendants and black witnesses. All this stuff everybody's worked up about police killings.
Yeah.
LAPD killed that many. All of them you've heard about over the last 4 or 5 years. They killed that many in every 1 or 2 week period.
Yeah.
So, it was brutal.
And you were the valedictorian. You were the valedictorian of Dorsey High School. Now, I graduated from Manual Arts High School, which is up the street on King Boulevard.
I know where it is.
And you graduated from Dorsey.
I was supposed to be going there, but I wound up transferring to Dorsey.
How did you survive the distractions of LA in the 1960s with everything that was going on? And if you can describe
it was hard.
Yes, sir.
It was hard. And still to this day, I cuss.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I appreciate it. Let's keep it going. Donate to the Super Chat. Donate to the PayPal. Donate to the Cash App. It's your contributions and your donations that'll cause for this platform to grow. Let our voice be the preeminent voice in Black America. I want to talk to you all today about plantation culture. And when I say plantation culture, I'm referring to the Black American culture that we have now. It's based on a plantation culture, a slave culture, actually, not even a plantation culture. Plantation would indicate that it's agrarian based, but this is a slave culture that we exist in. So, and as far as the slave culture, we're referring to the historical chattel slavery that African Americans had to endure in the United States. And that particular slave culture was based on black male oppression and now elimination, since we're no longer needed for manual labor. And so this is the culture that we exist in right now. A few high points. Where does our culture come from? Well, it's a composite of different things: language, food, holidays, the manners in which we interact with each other, our communication, our rituals, our roles, customs, relationships, practices, expected behaviors between each other's, values, thoughts. All of that gives rise to our culture. In effect, what it is a set of rules and procedures that meets our needs. The culture must solve problems, and when the culture no longer serves the people, either it needs to be transformed or the people will die. So let's look at our culture now. The language that we developed as African Americans living on the American plantations is a subset of the English language. It's also mixed with slang. Does that help us benefit now in this country that we live in now, in this world? The food that we traditionally ate on the plantations, poor nutrition, typically the worst parts of the animal or plant, and that doesn't serve our purpose anymore. It makes us unhealthy. It makes us more prone to diseases. So does that part of the culture solve problems? No, it creates problems. The holidays we celebrate, the religion that we celebrate. We celebrate holidays that celebrate our enemies' victories over us. The 4th of July, Thanksgiving. What else? Christmas. Christmas is a day in which African Americans pray to the same God that our oppressors, our enslavers, pray to. So I have to ask you, is that healthy as a culture? And our culture tells us that's the accepted religion. Now, I don't allow Islam to escape either, because the Arab slave trade predated the European slave trade. So the question you have to ask yourself is, amongst these cultures, amongst these items in the culture, is that healthy? Probably not, for those of you who are thinking. So in a situation like that, it has to change. It has to transform, or the people will die. Now the question you have to ask yourself is, who teaches the culture? Who passes the culture down from parent to child? Typically, your mother is your first teacher. Your mother instills in you the culture, which is why, if you look at this movie called Django, many of you wonder why at the end of the story did Django shoot Missy, which was the little white woman who seemed all innocent. It's because the director, the producer, the author of the movie, Quentin Tarantino, wanted to prove a point that even though this white woman looked all innocent, she was the one that taught those racist men the culture. She represents those women. Likewise, in the black community, our culture is passed down to us from our mothers. It's passed down to us from our mothers because they're our first teachers. They're the ones that teach us how we should react and interact and how we should speak. And so, in effect, they are our first teachers, and they teach us this culture, this same culture that, again, is designed to oppress black men and use us for our labor. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, black women endure the horrors of slavery as well as black men. But I would have to argue we endured it in different ways. It was black men who were being beaten savagely. Yes, black women endured some beatings, but for the most part, it was black men who endured the beatings. It was black men who were mutilated and beat down. Even now, for the most part, it's black men who are being eliminated. Now that we are no longer needed as a force, for labor, we're the ones that are deemed unnecessary, expendable. So we're either locked away, miseducated, or just shot down. How we interact with each other as men, black men to black men, we don't really. It's not a healthy interaction. Now, I'm not saying you don't have friends. I'm saying if you look at the murders that happen in the black community, typically it's black men murdering other black men, or black men hurting other black men. So in a situation like that, who taught us that? The culture. Yes, our mother taught us the culture, but it's also reinforced by a greater society that is working hand in hand with our culture to eliminate us at this point. So we have to ask ourselves, does this culture work anymore? Now, the culture that we dealt with, the culture arrived or was derived during slavery and hardship, and it was designed so that black men could survive. It was designed so that black people could survive. It allowed us to endure. We ate the food, we spoke the language, we pretended to be ignorant, we pretended to hate each other more than the white men hated us and our slave owners, and we played the role of slaves so that we can just get to this point. But slavery is over, and for the most part, that oppression and that elimination is still ongoing. And so a lot of black men, as I said, were treated like beasts. We didn't have any rights. We were basically the mules of society. We weren't allowed to express our own personal value. And those of us who did express their personal self-worth and value were deemed heretics. This is why the young man C.J. King, who recently graduated from law school, his expression that he is the prize was treated as heresy amongst those who are indoctrinated into the culture, because as black men, we're not allowed to speak on our self-value and self-worth. And so because of that, he was lambasted all throughout the internets. And so that's just an example. Whereas on the other hand, women are always allowed to speak, and black women especially are allowed to state and openly profess how educated they are, because that's acceptable in the culture. It's okay for mammy to say, oh yes, boss, I cooks real good. I'll cook you some cornbread. I was the best house slave you had. Yes, sir, boss. I sure can. It's perfectly acceptable for her to brag on that. But what's not acceptable is for the man to say, oh, I'm the best blacksmith on this side of town. I'm the best cotton picker on this side of town. Because what happens? That means that some other slave owner may want to buy that man, that son, that husband, that father, and take him off 200-300 miles away to some other plantation. Well, he'll never be seen again. Right? So that's why it's apropos for black men to express their self-worth in this culture, in this toxic, defective culture that we live in. Now, as a result of this, over the past 10 years, there has been what some mislabel as a battle of the sexes. I don't think it's a battle of the sexes. What I think it is an attempted transformation of the culture, which has been initiated by thinking black men who received all the negatives associated with the culture. And I think these black men are at the point where they realize either we're going to have to transform this culture or we are going to die. And for the most part, there's an incentive on black men to change the culture, because in this particular culture, we are powerless. So, where's the pushback coming from? The pushback is coming from those who reap the benefits of the culture, and that is our black female counterparts. Human beings, once imbued with power, very rarely want to give that power up. It is normal. And when I refer to power, I'm talking about social hierarchy. Little boys who were white back in the 1950s had the power to command grown black men to do anything they wanted to if they were out and about. And they were backed by a system that would enforce that social hierarchy. So a little 10-year-old boy could tell a grown black, call him a boy, get over there and fetch me some water. And that black man would have no other, well, he could fight back, but for the most part, there would be punishment if he did anything other than give back or do what the little white kid said, because that was the social hierarchy. In the situation we live in today as black men, black women outrank black men in the social hierarchy. And so because of that, they've been imbued with power, and that system and that hierarchy where they are empowered is enforced by the larger society. So they have no interest in changing the culture. Yes, they may be lower on the totem pole, but they outrank us. And in our community, they rank over us as black men. And they like that. And that's a normal human reaction to want to maintain power and maintain social power over others. So the back and forth that has been going on between black men and women are pleas for change versus those advocates who want to remain the same. And that also includes those black men who side with the black women and want to remain or want to keep the social hierarchy, keep the power dynamic as it is now. Those black men are now at the forefront of the so-called war of the sexes. I will oftentimes preach what I call a freedom doctrine. That's what I tell brothers. I tell them, in order to free yourself from this plantation, you have to recognize that you are free to go and come and do what you want to do. You could use your passport to go and leave the country if you want to. You're allowed to date whoever you want to. You're allowed to explore whatever gifts the world has to give to you. And so I receive a lot of pushback from African American women because they take this as anti-African American women when in actuality, it's anti-plantation culture. I'm basically telling these black men who have lived in this country since 1619 that they are free to come and go as they please, that they are no longer bound by this culture which has oppressed them and is now trying to eliminate them. And I get pushback from people who benefit from keeping black men in their oppressed positions socially. So you have to ask yourself, well, don't ask yourself, see it for what it is. And that's not anti-black female, that's not anti-black woman, that's pro-black man. In effect, I'm pro-black man freedom. I want these men to be independent and free and know that. Somebody has not told them that they are free. Now the pushback that I get, or some of the pleas that you hear from black men, or that you have heard, or that you heard over the last 40 or 50 years, they'll say things like black women are overbearing and domineering. But they have to, and what you have to understand is that black women have to do that, and that stems from slave culture, because remember, it was their job to keep the black male slaves oppressed and under control so that they can maintain their lives. They experienced a lot of fear and threats and death on those plantations. They understood what was happening to the Native Americans who were being eliminated when they tried to buck up against the system. The cavalry would come in and wipe out all the men, women, and children. So these black women are innately putting themselves in charge these black women put themselves in charge, and they have to be overbearing and domineering and keep black men oppressed for the purpose of survival. That was back then. But now in 2020, things are different. So in response, black men will say, or black women will say in response to black men saying you're overbearing and domineering, oh no, you just can't handle a strong black woman. You know, you need a weak woman. Another thing they'll say is when black men express their desire to date women of different cultures, black women will try to shame them and label them as color struck, or even tell them that they have self-hate. Now, ironically, many of the black men who travel and marry out, quote unquote, are actually marrying women who are of African descent. Even thinking about that, if they're marrying women of African descent, that's not actually marrying out. Furthermore, if they're actually marrying women from the continent, that's actually marrying in. So this is not a race issue. Again, this is a cultural issue. Women from Jamaica are of African descent. Women from West Africa are Africans. Women from East Africa are Africans. They are ethnically Africans. So that's not marrying out. But if you put it in the context of marrying out of the culture, that is, because remember what will happen. Those children belong to that woman who's from Africa or Jamaica or whatever other country they might be. And I'm not just limited it to women of African descent. There are black men who marry women of all other ethnicities, and which is perfectly within their right. The question is, why are African American women so quick to shame them? It's because when these men take their resources and they take their money and they take their time and their attention and give it to another woman, then that takes away from the culture that we have here in the United States, as I explained earlier, which comes from a slave culture. It takes power away from them, because if your interactions with these men is limited, then how can you express your power dynamic? If after the end of slavery, all the black Americans left the country and returned to the continent of Africa, to, I believe, Sierra Leone, which was set up after slavery, then the power dynamic here in the United States, who would white people have to oppress? They would have to oppress other white people. They would have to find someone to oppress. But for the most part, that power dynamic would be eliminated. They wouldn't have enough people. They wouldn't have enough people of different cultures, different races and ethnicities to express their power over. It would just be a bunch of white folks around. So as far as black American women, they recognize, and again, you can't shame a human being for wanting to hold on to their social status. So you shouldn't be upset with black women for doing everything that they have been trained to do. And that is maintain the social dynamic, maintain the oppressive system that is set up to oppress and eliminate black men, which stems from the plantation. Because in the immediate future, they look at it as, you're taking our power away. And we as human beings want to be in power. So who would we have to stand on the backs of if you all left? If you all start marrying women from Africa, start marrying women from other cultures, you start marrying women from Latin America, you start marrying women who are Caucasian, you're no longer in our culture. We can no longer program the children that you give rise to or that we have to further this culture. Every organism wants to continue living. So this is not their fault, but we still have to address it. So as it is right now, and as I said before, there are a lot of thinking black men who have attained resources and who have attained some level of understanding of the world. And oftentimes when that happens, lights begin to go off in your mind and you realize you have options. So in this particular day and time that we live in, the statistics show that, number one, black men are the least married men in the United States. What that means is they've examined their options and they don't like them. Furthermore, black men, percentage-wise, have less children than others. In other words, the majority of black men don't have children, which means that not only are they not getting married, but they're also not having children. These are statistics you can check with the CDC. I'm not making this stuff up. But what I'm trying to do is put it in context for you. It is a response to the realization, whether actively or intuitively, that this culture is destructive for black men. And so they don't want to buy into it. So 30% of black men who are educated are marrying out. You see many black men traveling and going overseas, and some of the younger generations of brothers, the millennials, Generation Z, they probably have a higher rate of marrying out than even my generation, which is the X generation. And I believe my generation was probably the cutoff point. We were the last generation where it was almost shameful to have children outside of wedlock. But this generation is a little different. And on top of that, and I tell people, or the generations after that, it's a little different. And I point out the fact that wedlock is a problem because in order to have a culture, you got to have a community, which is like a bowl that keeps that culture in one collective area or location and reinforces that culture. And you can't have a community unless you have families. You can't even have a society unless you have families. And families are composed of moms and dads and children. You can't just have a woman and some kids, or even a dad and some kids. You need a woman, you need a family, and that's what it takes. Now, I don't want to get off into the other dynamics that we have here in the United States of who can get married and who can't, but I just wanted to point that out. And so that's why it's important. So there's holes in our bowl. There's holes in our bowls that are supposed to hold the culture, and it's filtering out. And so you have very prominent black men going other places. You have to marry, to live. The culture that we have now, it does not solve the problems that we as black men face. It does not, our culture, our food, the way we interact does not preserve our lives. We all are very upset about the young man, Ahmaud Arbery, being murdered. We are very upset about that. And he will be probably one of 1,500 black men who were murdered by the police this year when it's all said and done. But what we're not addressing is our culture, which allows it to be acceptable for us to murder and hurt other black men, man to man, black on black. We don't address that. That's a cultural issue. That cultural issue is more of a problem than one black man being shot by some redneck, racist bastards. We kill more of our own than anybody else. Now, I know some of you will say, oh, well, that's because of proximity. I get that part, I understand that, but that does not mean it's acceptable. That's not acceptable. And where else in the country do you have young black men under the age of, or men under the age of 30 who murder each other en masse like that? I understand domestic violence happens, you're close to each other, there's issues, I understand that, but we make up reasons to murder each other. We make up because of the location where you live in the neighborhood, or because of the color of your bandana, because of the clique that you're associated with. Our killing of each other is mechanized, which means that there is something innate in the culture that says it is okay to harm black men. Again, it's the culture that stems from slavery, which was designed to keep black men oppressed and now to eliminate us. So it's natural for that to be an outcropping. Hey, you know what? Keeping them oppressed means beating them. So keeping them hurt, keeping them inept, downtrodden. So a natural outcropping that is, well, you're unworthy of life and I'll kill you. And that's what we have been raised in. And that's unfortunate. So the culture needs to change. Our culture doesn't produce, and here's another thing, our culture, as it is right now, does not produce high quality men and women needed to create families and needed to sustain communities. And that's something painful to listen to. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some high quality men and women who are marriage material, but I'm saying en masse, if you have a small percentage of men who are worthy of being husbands, who are trained to be husbands, and only a small percentage of women who are worthy of being wives, trained to be wives, then you're going to have a small percentage of successful marriages. Because even amongst those people who pair off, there's still going to be divorces in those relationships. So now you got a small percentage of, now you have an even smaller percentage of an already small percentage of people who are getting married and staying married. So how can you maintain a community like that? That's where we are. And it's because our culture needs to transform. Now, both as a result, men are not getting married. They're not marrying black women. They are, the statistic says about 20% of black men are having children outside of wedlock with multiple women, whereas about 80% of women are having children by that same 20% of men. So what that tells us is that we have some serious problems. We have a lot of children being grown, being raised by their mothers who are instilling that culture in them. Now, the other thing you have to understand is it's not just black men who recognize that this culture is toxic and they're trying to escape it. It's also black women. And for the past 8 or 9 years, it has been something called the swirling movement. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, that's black women telling other black women you should date out, you should marry men of other races, and you should, get away from this toxic slave culture that we have going on in the United States, that we have here in Black America. Now, the thing that you'll have to understand is black men marrying out and black women marrying out, there's different baggage that comes along with that. Many of you who have been married know that women oftentimes want to stay close to their mothers. They want to stay close to their friends and their sisters. Matter of fact, any relationship coach will tell you the first thing a woman does when she gets in a relationship is she wants to cut you off from your friends and cut you off from your family so that she can have you all to herself and so that you can be brought into her culture. That's normal female behavior. You leave your family and you come on over into her culture, and you and the kids are comfortable in her culture. That's how that works. Now imagine this, a black American woman with her own culture marrying someone of another culture, being forced to try to fit in that culture with those women who are from a culture that is foreign to hers. We can pick one, let's say Indian culture from India. That's a very big, strange jump for her. She's going to have to learn a new way of interacting, a new food, new religion, all these different things. I'm not saying that it can't be done, and I'm not saying that it hasn't been done in the past. But what I'm saying is this is a painful transition for women. Men, on the other hand, probably won't even go to church. Probably will eat what's in front of them. Probably not so terribly concerned about the interactions that they have with their mom and their dad and their brothers and sisters after a certain age. So it's a little different. It's a little easier for men to transition into other cultures. That's why men have often traveled the world and stayed where they were, because they don't need to go home as much. They don't need that reinforcement from the culture. They don't need to interact with their mom and dad and all these people as much. And so in a situation like that, when both black men and black women are trying to marry out, it's a little easier transition for men than it is women. And then on top of that, men oftentimes bring along less baggage. As long as he works, He's easy, manageable, pretty easy to get along with. Women can just kind of work with you. They're not as picky, I guess, in that regard. But I just wanted to say all this, and I'm going to summarize it by saying this. I've had several people on Facebook, and I've overheard some conversations on YouTube where people mistake my doctrine. And I don't know if they were talking about me specifically, but I want black men to be free. I want you to recognize that this entire world belongs to you, and you should go and travel this world and see what your options are. And the first expression of freedom is to take your life and your destiny in your own hands. Whether you decide after you know what your options are to come back and marry a woman from Black America or in the United States, that's your option. I just want you to know that you're free. You're a free man. You're no longer bound to these shores. You're no longer in chains. All your chains are here now. They're all mental chains. See, this is something that I wish somebody had told me back when I was a young man. You're not bound to this country. This is only one of about 150 countries in the world, and you're free to go and come as you choose. A lot of people don't like me saying that. They don't like me saying that because, again, it undermines the power dynamic. It undermines the culture. If you got too many black men exiting Black American culture, exiting the United States and marrying out, it undermines the culture. And people are hardwired, especially black men and black women who subscribe to the culture, who benefit from the culture. They are hardwired to try to maintain the culture, but the same culture is destroying us. The same culture was designed to oppress and eliminate, well, it was designed to oppress black men and use us for labor. And now, since we're no longer the number one labor force, it's designed to eliminate us, which is why you have a culture and laws and television and radio, which and movies and all these images, which do nothing more than glorify the deaths of black men and our degeneracy. The music that we listen to, it's music for degenerates that programs the next or reinforces the culture in the next generation. And so I tell black men, escape that, get away from that. And you black women shouldn't take that personal. It's not about you, it's about these men. It's about these men finding their freedom and finally doing what our ancestors wanted us to do, and that is to be free and independent and autonomous human beings that we were designed to be. This is what God wants for his children. And to tell them that, oh, they're somehow less than men, or that they're somehow weak because they want to exercise the freedom that our ancestors fought for, is shameful. It's not about you ladies. It's about these young men, especially these young men, going out there and exploring the world. Now, the thing you got to understand, ladies, is you have the first crack at these men. If you love them, if you treat them right, they will never forget that. If you mothers, if you love them and you treat them right and you raise your children to be strong, independent children, and you focus the love and attention you need to on your boys, and you cherish them, and you publicly praise them. And I'm not talking about public praise with qualifications, and I'm not talking about publicly praising your NBA first round draft choice son and your NFL son, and I'm talking about that regular little black boy who is, probably not going to end up playing professional sports. You need to praise them, and you need to tell them how worthy they are. And that will instill something in them, and it'll make them love you forever. And it also, if we could also do that with our black children, our black daughters, that would be helpful to try to transform this culture and keep these brothers from wanting to leave, and also keeping these sisters from wanting to leave. And that's really the gist of what I have to say. Other than that, at this point, there's really no stopping this train. The world has become too small. You're able to communicate with somebody across the world instantly and for free. They have dating apps. All you got to do is type in a button and pick a city in anywhere in the world, and what will happen is you'll meet people from everywhere. So you're not going to be able to escape what's coming. Black men have options, but that's aside from the culture. Now, we're talking about the culture, but black women are looking at it like, well, you know, we don't want these men marrying out. Yeah, I get it. But see, the thing is, if you women could find men to replace those men, you wouldn't care if they left. If you could replace all those black men with white men, you wouldn't care, because you would still be able to maintain your power dynamic. But because you know that black men are the only ones who have been custom trained to adhere to the black culture, which keeps them oppressed, and nobody else will. You want to keep these black men in place. Chinese men aren't going to do it. Asian men aren't going to do it. White men aren't going to do it. Latin men definitely aren't going to do it. So the only men that you have that will allow you to maintain your power are black American men. African men from Africa won't even do it. They won't let you oppress them and mistreat them. It's only black men that will. And what I'm trying to do is tell these black men, hey, you don't have to take that anymore. You're free. The world is yours. You're a man. Pick up your bags and move on. And a lot of you women don't like that, but that's unfortunate. But that reflects more on you than it does me. That means you're selfish. Now, you should compete with these other women if you want to keep good men. And you can't say you need to just come back here just because we're black and just because we have a common experience that stemmed out of slavery. Okay, so what if he meets a woman who's from Jamaica or Grenada? They were enslaved too, but she's probably going to treat them differently because they didn't have the system that we have in place, which is designed specifically to keep black men oppressed. So you can't really say that they don't share the same common slave experience and that they are not of the same ethnicity. That's just kind of, it's illogical. And so when you cut through it, we recognize exactly what it is. You want to maintain your power dynamic over brothers. And these thinking black men, these black men who are awakening, many of these black men who started off looking for dating advice end up getting red pilled, and they start understanding female nature. And that led to them putting their red pill lenses on, and now they see the world in a totally different way. And you're not going to be able to make them unsee what they've already seen. And you're not going to be able to stop us from communicating with each other and telling each other, brother, you're free now. We bore the burden of slavery. It wasn't until 1806, 1808 that black women began to be imported to the United States, and they had to do that because the transatlantic slave trade was made illegal. But before that, it was mostly just 90% black men on those slave ships and a few black women that were used for cooking and in-house domestic work. Black men, and that's why after 1808, the population went from 400,000 to 4 million in 50 years, and the 53 years to the end of slavery. So it was black men who endured the brunt of slavery in the United States. They worked us to death, they beat us, and then they replaced us with somebody new. The breeding farms didn't come about until after slavery was outlawed. A transatlantic slave trade was outlawed, so they could no longer bring slaves on. But for the most part, black men, we've done our time. We've done enough. And I tell these brothers all the time, you free, man. And anybody that doesn't like it, that's just something you have to take up with God. But you brothers are free. I hope this answers a lot of the questions. I am not anti anybody. I'm not anti-black woman. I'm not anti-black anything. I'm pro-black man. I'm pro-black sons, my sons. I'm pro-black myself. And, you know, I'm gonna end this with this. You know, I wasn't always like this. You know, I thought that, you know, I could go on and live my life and enjoy life, and have my law degrees and successful law practice. And around about 2012, You know, I thought I was through, but my sons, and life was good. And then my best friend got murdered by 2 young black men. He was about 30, 34. We went to college together. And he got murdered by 2 young brothers. They just robbed him after he got off work, shot him and killed him out in Atlanta. And that really set me to thinking. It really helped me realize that I can't escape this culture. And my children can't escape this culture. And having all sons, it really hit home to me. You know, after that, I started packing a pistol. And then maybe a couple years after that, I realized, well, who am I going to shoot with this? It's mostly probably going to be another black man. So I'm going to be part of that problem in the culture. So it made me start looking deep. And the deeper I began to look, the more I began to realize this is a cultural issue. This is a systemic issue. And what we need to do is try to help these black men escape this oppression and find some peace of mind and happiness. So my advocacy on behalf of black men is for self-preservation, because these black men are not going to go out and shoot and kill and hurt females. They're going to come out and shoot and kill and hurt somebody that looks like me, or my sons, or my brothers, my uncles, my father. So this is what you all are fighting against. You're fighting against black men who are fighting for their own survival. And so you're not going to win that fight. And so what I suggest you do, folks, you black men who think that these men are being anti-black female because they're complaining about the mistreatment that they've suffered as a result of the institution of the culture which oppresses them. That's going to fall on deaf ears, because everybody wants to survive. That's a human thing to do. So I don't have anything else to say. God bless you. I love you all. Again, my messages come from a place of love and healing. I have no intention to hurt anybody. I just want to speak the raw, unfiltered truth. And I invite you all to, comment on this, share this page.
Hey, if you're enjoying the content here at Dennis Sperling Unfiltered, make sure you support it by sharing, and subscribing to the channel. And also, hit that little notification bell in the corner so that you'll get notice of each and every one of our live feeds.